Councillor Bentley, if you'd like to open our meeting, please, with the council prayer. And ask councillors to stand.
Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. And if I could just remind councillors to have your cell phones off and out of reach. And also, I hear this morning that the live streaming broke at some stage during the middle in our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee, so that will be captured and then put online. Is that right? Yeah. Thank you. Now, I call for any apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Tania Tapsell. You move? Yes, second. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, we move now to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There appear to be none. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? There appear to be none. We move on to the report of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting. Oh, you've got it up, thank you. On the 4th of June, do I have a mover and a seconder that the report of the Operations and Monitoring on the 4th of June be received? Moved, Councillor Yates, seconded Councillor Rokawa Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. And I'll take the recommendations of the Operations and Monitoring meeting on the 4th of June separately, each individually. So recommendation 1, the Nzta Village Traffic Safety and Place-Based Improvements. That Council agree to direct staff to prepare and initiate engagement with the public on the 3 high-level concepts, and that officers bring back to Council the results of the public feedback with a recommendation on the preferred options. Do I have a mover? Councillor Donaldson, seconder. Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Recommendation 2, Rural School Road Safety Review and option to extend to all schools. 1, that Council agree to extend this review process district-wide to inform the next Nzta funding application round 2021 to 2024, and 2, that Council note that the Rural Community Board, if it is feasible, fast-track safety solutions for rural schools using its devolved funding. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rokawa Tate, seconded Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Recommendation 3, Margherita Street Traffic Management and Road Safety Improvements Engagement Methodology. 1, that Council approved the proposed engagement methodology with the general public on the potential options for road safety improvements on Margarita Street, including the possible closure of Margarita Street as a through road, and 2, that Council agree that the results of the public engagement and community feedback are brought back to Council for consideration prior to any implementation of the recommended option. Moved, Councillor Bentley, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Councillor Bentley, you have a question?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. I've been discussing this Margarita Street thing with quite a few of the residents down there, and one of the ones they came up with, in addition to the 3 proposals that we've said to consider, they've asked if I could ask you to include perhaps a 4th proposal, being that Hilda Street as a proposal, gets blocked off from Margarita Street.
The recommendation really is just our methodology for going out to engage with the community. I'm sure we could note Councillor Bentley, but we can't do anything with it. The recommendation from the committee was how we engage with the community on the options. You could encourage another option to come back as part of that feedback. Thank you. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. I hear it was an interesting meeting the other night. So the following items will now be released to the public. Recommendation 4, Contract 19/052, the tender proposal approval for the Kaharoa Reservoir construction, RDC/1008780. 1, that Council award Contract 19/052 for the Kaharoa Reservoir construction to Concrete Structures New Zealand Limited for the sum of 1.229009.70. Do I have a mover? Councillor Wang, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Move now to the next recommendation. That Contract 20/007, the tender approval for professional services for capital projects transport 2020 to 2025. 1, that the Council award Contract 20/007, professional services for capital works transport 2020 to 2025 to GHD Limited for the sum of up to 208.100. All those in favour? Oh, I need a mover. Thank you. Second, Councillor Yates. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Question?
Thank you. Can you please
Councillor
record?
McPherson? Yeah.
Thank you. No, it's not a question. It's to indicate I wish to vote against this proposal.
I've put the vote. It's carried. The vote was carried, but we can record it. Yeah. Recommendation 6, Contract 19/061, the tender approval for streetlight maintenance and renewals 2020 to 2030, RDC/1011990. 1, that Council approve the tender for maintenance, renewals and LED conversion of streetlights of Mackay Limited for the sum of 079.72 be approved, subject to confirmation that the funding for the LED capital conversion is included in the adopted 2021 annual plan. 2, that Council notes that in the event of the funding for the LED capital conversions is not included in the adopted 20/21 annual plan, the contract will be awarded to Mackay Limited for the sum of 2,409,570.51 for maintenance and renewals only of streetlights for a maximum period of 10 years. Do I have a mover? Councillor Wang, seconded Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. We now move to staff reports, and Thomas, you're going to come and we're looking at the annual plan, and you're going to give us an overview.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, councillors. This really brings to an end about an 8-month journey. Pre-Christmas, we started work on the annual plan, and in January we were getting ready to have discussions with our community. And as we all know, COVID arrived and our world changed. During lockdown, we talked about obviously the strategies around helping Rotorua recover, and in particular around building back Rotorua better. And so the annual plan morphed into a funding plan to help support the ideas and the strategies that fell out of those discussions. And in particular, these were the 8 strands which we were looking to cover. So rates relief, obviously focusing on the 4th instalment of the previous year with regards to providing temporary relief for those affected due to the close down, but also ensuring that we had delivered a 0% general rates increase, and only those rates that were moving were targeted rates, and that was reflective really of the challenges that those services were facing, and predominantly driven from sewerage and waste management. And so overall that did provide a 4.7% overall increase, and as you recall at the last SPNF meeting we have pulled that down to 4.0%. On top of that, focusing on the UAGC in an environment where the general rate was static, using it as an opportunity to move towards being more progressive with regards to the collection of the general rate by reducing the UAGC by $25, which meant a larger portion of the general rate fell on capital value and therefore more reflective of those that have the ability to pay. Underpinning the plan as well is the prudent use of debt, and so really ensuring that we had a significant capital works program to not only look after the assets that we've got, but also to be able to leverage those for creating local employment, but also ensuring that their projects were delivering on the economic future of Rotorua. So it was around ensuring that our underlying capital works program of 120 million would continue. It's the continuation of the museum, it's the continuation of the Performing Arts Centre, it's the finalisation of the lakefront and the finalisation of the Waka Forest projects. So 4 key projects really underpinning the economic future of Rotorua. On top of that, providing an additional 29 million, of which 9 million is in this fiscal year, to support the emerging issues and the strategic challenges that will fall out of discussions with our communities, and options for council to co-invest or not, and some of these to help Rotorua progress. And on top of that, finally, the establishment of the $1 million community fund, which was really targeting those community organisations that may face distress and providing some assistance during this upcoming period. And so overall, the plan therefore is around Build Back Better, about supporting Rotorua, about being adaptive and ensuring that when we do spend very purposefully with our spend, and delivering obviously the visions and the goals of our community. So with that, any questions?
Mover to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Yates. Seconded, Councillor Rokawa Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Now we'll open for questions, Thomas. Are there any questions? All right, there don't appear to be any questions for clarification. Oh.
Just a point on the process. You've asked if we can ask questions at this stage. Will there be an opportunity to make statements before we take a vote? Thank you very much. And thanks for lending me your phone.
All councillors to have an opportunity to speak. Thank you, and I'll take them rather randomly, really. Councillor Bentley, do you wish to make a statement about the annual plan?
Yeah, overall annual plan. I've got some fairly strong views on it. Yes, Madam Mayor. The fact that I think at one of the meetings we had recently, Thomas informed us that we would be borrowing to run this company for a while. I'm not at all happy about that, but if you've got to borrow money to keep yourself in business, that's a pretty dire thing to be admitting to. And we should be discussing cutting costs rather than increasing our project expenditure. Some of these projects that we're tackling are tourist related, which is going to suffer badly for the next 2 or 3 years or the foreseeable future. The outsourcing of the sewage thing is is almost universally condemned by people much more knowledgeable in this thing than I am. And, there's a lot of eminent and knowledgeable people that have spoken emphatically against this proposal. I tend to side with them and think we should be encouraging resourcing our own staff to become competent at running this thing. That's it for the minute.
Point of order, Your Worship. Could I suggest, seeing we've now moved into discussion and debate on the annual plan, that we have a mover and a seconder, and I would like to signal I'd like to move it so that I have a right of reply to some of these assertions that are being made.
Certainly. Moved by Councillor Donaldson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. We can't adopt. No, now you have a right of reply. Right. So, Councillor Donaldson, you signalled that you wish to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'm delighted to support this annual plan. I think it's well balanced. I think it absolutely is the right decision in either going down the path of austerity or investment for cushioning the impact of a pandemic and building back better for recovery for Rotorua. So, for me, there's a huge period of change coming across our community as a result of the pandemic. And we're in a position now where the team of 5 million has arrived 30 years earlier than Stats New Zealand predicted it would back in 2004. So, we have a population of 5 million and growing rapidly as expats return, and we need to be working with central government, aligning with central government and leveraging our partnerships to invest to build that better and have Rotorua be prepared to soar post-pandemic. So with those few words, I think it's incredibly important that we use intergenerational funding so that although future generations will be paying it back, they'll also be reaping the rewards of the investments that are made here today. So with those few words, I'll just reserve any comments for perhaps a right of reply.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For me, I think that this annual plan provides us with the tools to assist the community going forward. There are some bits that I'm a little bit uncertain about, but I think overall that the plan provides some good certainty, some steerage, if you like, in terms of the direction in which we are going. And I think that going forward, it's going to be how we apply those tools. So it's a prudent use of debt, so that we need to be ensuring that, what are we using debt for? What are we spending in that area? In terms of the economic recovery spending, we had a bit of a robust discussion this morning about how we would look at the projects, how we would evaluate them, how we would prioritise that spending within that economic recovery package. I think it's good that we've set that funding aside and that we've got the opportunity going forward to have a much better look at how we will position the district with those projects going forward. I think it's, in terms of the zero rates increase, I think that's an incredible amount of work that have been done by the staff, and particularly Jeff, to keep some spending under control, and maybe that's something that, depending on what happens going forward, that there might have to be an even tighter look at that, but once again, we've got the tools within the current annual plan to give us the focus going forward. So I'm supportive of this plan and look forward to having a much more robust discussion later on about how we might be using debt or how we might be applying some of these funds from the Economic Recovery Project pool of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard a lot of discussion around this, I'm still sitting on the fence with it, but I'll say one thing though. Outsourced, I see it as, when I see things like outsourcing in the annual plan regarding water, I firmly believe that it should be managed in-house. There are some opportunities in the post-pandemic, but we are not safe building for any other investing, thinking that this was the only pandemic ever. I believe that a cautious approach is more prudent, and that audacity, rather than being audacious, being lauded for being audacious, we should be a little bit more prudent and actively thinking that, look, this is that's something else. If it does happen, what is our recovery plan on that? So that's future proofing is not in this annual plan. It only just shows a quick, robust recovery.
Kia ora through you, Chair, and fellow councillors, and members of the public. You're all very well. Tēnā koutou katoa. Many of you will recall the Pepe ha that asks a question and answers it. You recall it here, a te mea nui o te ao. The answer, of course, is tangata, tangata. It's the people. So to what extent does the proposed annual plan before us respond to the interests of the people? It's deepening saddening to me that a standout feature of the planning process has been the unwillingness of Council to give priority to the affordability of any rates rise to ratepayers, he tangata. You will all recall in November last year when I traced how the definition of affordability of rates to ratepayers had been progressively modified in the annual plan since 2013. It ceased being a planning issue of any great significance, and it was redefined in effect as the amount that had to be afforded by ratepayers to support Council's priorities. That definition is back to front. It contradicts the Pepe ha that reminds us that the people's interests are the most important consideration, not Council, which is a service organisation. But the back to front definition is now being used in this current plan to justify the Council's latest set of demands for an even more rates and even more debt to support expansionism. Since 2013, Council's expansionism has galloped ahead of inflation and the CPI-indexed benefits that sustain the poor, mostly Maori, and the elderly. And the annual plan before us follows the same trends and continues to hit the poorest the hardest. But with the impact of COVID, quite literally, He tangata can no longer afford this Council's dreams. I've got to ask, fairly bluntly, do you imagine for a moment that Councillors Bentley and I and Raj are just lone wolves howling at the moon? No. Our persistent request for a rates freeze or cuts not only reflects the views of 663 current members and associates of our Rotorua District residents and ratepayers, but also most of the 5,000 friends and 2,329 followers we have on Facebook. Are these numbers significant? Well, allowing for overlap, this group of tangata, he tangata, is at least 40% of those who voted in the last election. After Te Arawinui Tonu, we are the largest organised interest group in the world.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Are we talking to our annual plan? I'm just wondering where this is going.
I'm coming back to that. And our message, therefore, about the annual plan is quite simple. Long before COVID, we asked for a rates freeze or cuts to stop the runaway debt and wasteful spending. and for a more inclusive approach to planning and budgeting to bring he tangata together and restore some reality to our slogan, tātou tātou. Both requests were denied. If you think I exaggerate about making these statements, please go to our Facebook page and read them for yourself.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Councillor McPherson is straying into his role as a submitter, and he should really have declared a predetermined bias. His Facebook page as recently as the last 2 days was running sponsored advertisements about council's debt from a former mayor, and it is unacceptable and dangerous to our decision-making process for him to run those same lines in a debate. He should not even be sitting at the table.
If I might continue.
Councillor McPherson, would you like to withdraw those statements, please, and apologise about your Facebook?
I don't think that's appropriate.
Just rephrase that last statement that you made, please. You're straying into being both a submitter and then having to deliberate.
Well, my understanding was that my prior preliminary positions were modified by subsequent concerns, and since then I've gone on and synthesised to this my final position. And my hope would be that my fellow councillors, even though they are diametrically opposed to my views, would just allow me the time to actually present these views. Then they will have ample opportunity to reply and put up their views. So I'm just asking to be heard.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Yes.
I'm absolutely, if Councillor McPherson insists, I'm happy to hear his views, but I don't need the views of social media, the social media community.
And that was the point I was asking you, Councillor McPherson, to rephrase your last statement. Social media is not what guides us as politicians to represent our community. So would you like to rephrase? And you've got 2 minutes left.
Well, let me put it this way, is the views that I express have a really solid base in our community, and I'll leave it at that. If I might continue? Thank you. Logically, it seems to me, and those that I speak for, we need a fresh vision, a fresh approach, and a fresh plan, and a fresh budget to respond to the dramatically different situation that he tangata face post-COVID, if we put them first. The latest draft annual plan and budget is based also on a cargo cult mentality.
Point of order.
The council...
You mustn't use statements, Councillor McPherson, like a cargo cult mentality. This is a democracy here. Please rephrase your last statement.
I'll delete that sentence, if I might continue. The council is heading for about $250 million worth of debt, and in my view is vastly overcommitted to multiple projects. It's now more or less utterly dependent on the promises made by pork-barrelling politicians being honoured after the election.
Councillor McPherson. Councillor McPherson, your use of language is going to preclude you from finishing your statement. You've got 1 minute left. You use ridiculously broad statements that have no bearing at all on the annual plan which we are debating.
The very next sentence clarifies the meaning of this. It says that the draft annual plan and budget for 2021 before us is going to have to be revised in 9 weeks' time. We should spend that time, in my view, in remodelling and rebudgeting a fresh approach around the dramatically reduced affordability of rates to he tangata. Well, it's very disappointing that I get cut off like this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This annual plan has been the most, it's just the most unusual annual plan we've ever had to have, and I want to, or I've ever been involved in, but I too want to commend the work that the staff under Jeff Skylance has worked hard behind the scenes to bring us a 0 rate increase and 4% for the targeted rates. I mean, that wasn't easy. And so I won't repeat the comments that have been said by fellow colleagues who have been supportive of the annual plan through real challenging times. But I do want to ask, actually, I'm not feeling very comfortable about the fact that Mr. McPherson is even, who submitted and is now taking part in the decision that's going to affect the annual plan for next year. I think I said this at last week's meeting, that I think he has a conflict of interest, and I believe
Point of
that.
order, Chair.
I think he has a conflict of interest, and for me, having the legal opinion given to us last week confirms it even more for me. The annual plan and what Mr. McPherson has been doing should not reflect on Rotorua Lakes Council's professionalism, integrity, or reputation. And he says a fresh approach. I'd love it if he'd sometimes, instead of going down the track that he does do, forever criticising.
Can you hear my point of order, please?
Okay, yeah, let's have a listen. See if it's a fresh
Point of order,
approach.
Madam Chair. I thought we were discussing the annual plan, not personal attacks on...
Well, the annual plan, I don't think he should be at the table. Conflict of interest.
Point of order, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. The point of order is misrepresentation. I'm perfectly happy for Councillor Maxwell to express his views on the annual plan, but he utterly misrepresents my views. Thank you.
Will uphold that Councillor Maxwell is technically correct. We had independent legal advice, and that you were absolutely conflicted. You refused to accept that advice. We allowed you to speak today. Continue, Councillor Maxwell.
Well, I hope he's not voting today. That's the important thing. And all I'll say is I'm supportive of the of our annual plan, but I do hope our code of conduct in the future can be somehow strengthened, and it just carries no weight at the moment.
Councillor Maxwell, I think that is a different issue outside of the annual plan.
But can I ask through the chair, is Mr. McPherson going to be voting on the annual plan? If he is, then I think I've got a strong point that it is a conflict of interest. No, not you. I want to hear from the chair.
It's through the chair. That is a decision for Councillor McPherson to make, knowing the legal advice about putting his council colleagues at commercial risk.
That's what I'm worried about.
If he chooses to vote on the annual plan, it would be so much safer, as we were advised by legal counsel, if Councillor McPherson, who was the submitter, recused himself from the vote, and that is my recommendation to Councillor McPherson.
And finally, am I allowed to have my vote recorded against Councillor McPherson taking part in the decision?
Certainly, I'll uphold
Thank you,
that.
please.
That's in line with the legal advice that we received last week. Now I'll ask Councillor Rokawa Tate.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, thank you. This is a good annual plan. Do you know, it was only on the 25th of March that we actually adopted the Rotorua recovery plan, and 2 days later we went into level 4 lockdown. So I do want to congratulate you, Jeff, and the staff who've put the plan together. What we have to do, I believe, is we have to envision a future for all of our citizens, not just certain sectors of our community that subscribe to some Facebook or media, whatever it is, social media. We've got to be there for all of our community. And I'm so pleased that in the years that I've been a councillor, but I believe I'm getting the feedback from most of our sectors of our community, because that's what I was elected for. I wasn't elected for a certain sector. I was elected to bring my skills and my knowledge and my background to this table so that I could vote on all of the issues with a clear view of our citizens and their aspirations. And so I'm pleased to be here today to vote on this. This is not so much an annual plan for us, of course it is. And, you know, all businesses borrow. I heard somebody before say, you know, we might have to borrow. All businesses from time to time borrow. That's nothing new. So I don't know where that one came from. But this is actually a test of our leadership. This is a test of courageous leadership. We can all pull in the, you know, tighten down the buttons and everything and say, woe is us, and we're just going to wait and see what happens. This is a test of courageous leadership. And that's what I want to signal today, that we should be thinking in terms like that. They do say, cometh the hour, cometh the person, or cometh the leader. And I say, cometh the hour for this one, and cometh the courageous leadership. We have to be able to even believe it before we see it. We have to believe that within a few years' time, we'll have bounced back, not only better, but also different as well. And that requires courageous leadership. I've heard some of the arguments that have been put forward. I think they're not helpful. They come from someone who doesn't know what council's job is, who doesn't know the background that goes into all of the projects that we have got outlined here, that has no idea of the amount of work that has gone into build relationships, strong relationships that will endure over many years. And those people are in our community right now, putting their hands up and saying, we're supporting this. We're supporting this because this is our future. It's where we are right now. It's our future, and it's our responsibility. And they're not saying, oh, woe is us, batten down the hatches. They're not saying point of order to this one and that one. They're not saying we're here just for a certain sector. We're all in this together. And that's why I'm absolutely delighted to be here. We're a good country, but we can be a great country. And that's the courageous leadership that's now required. We're seeing some of that from central government, and we're politicians. We're politicians. People elected us to actually show courageous leadership. And a time like this with COVID, and we don't even know some of the long-term impacts. This is where courageous leadership is called for. So I'm absolutely in favour of this. I think we've got our challenges ahead of us, no doubt about that. There'll be some robust discussion in the future, but I absolutely support our annual plan today. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I would like to say that I am in support of the annual plan. Look, COVID-19 has hit all of us hard, council and the community alike, and there will be many, many challenges ahead. But I want to say to our community, our families out there that have lost their jobs, that have lost their income, families are struggling to get by right now, that we stand beside you and we are going through this together. We've had a really robust conversation over the past few months regarding the annual plan and our recovery. And some of it was spent in lockdown, where we saw the real effects that the pandemic has on our environment and the current climate. But with the intergenerational spending, I believe, for our future generations, they'll benefit from our investment in our infrastructure, and that's what the intergenerational debt is for. I also want to congratulate our staff and Jeff as well for achieving a 0% increase on our general rate. I think it will give our community a much needed relief. But with the 4% average targeted rates increase, which I think is really needed because we still need to keep our essential water infrastructure, our essential wastewater, water supply running. And as we can see from the effects of climate change, that infrastructure is only going to come under increased amounts of stress. I did have one question regarding on page 9 with provide for cushioning the blow, continue to offer rates deferment in 2020. Was it supposed to be 2021? Sorry. Well, oh, sorry, yes. Well, I was under the impression that it was supposed to be offered into 2021, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Whilst I support the annual plan, this is a clear demonstration for our people. It demonstrates confidence. It reflects many aspirations of our community, and to use the pepeha, he ha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What I see this plan doing is providing it for our future generations. I would like to commend the prudent use of debt to present as a recovery mechanism for our people. Tātou, tātou. Key highlights for me in this particular plan, I've got two things. Iwi partnerships, and the one that warms my heart is the $1 million, which I hope to see at some stage maybe increase, around community resilience, because during level 4 it was our community that kept our whānau alive and alight at night, and during the day, through whether it be through singing or their arts. Nō reira ka oti taku kōrero ki tēnei, whaitatiri ki te rangi, te aroa ki te whenua. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And I'd like to have my say too. And I think it's been fair that we allowed councillors who had a clear conflict to make their statement today too, rather than feel that you were shut down. But this plan to me is the most astonishing annual plan that I've seen in my time of leadership of this council. We were going along as usual, and then this dreadful condition of COVID. And we were all in lockdown, which was a profound time for us all as individuals to reflect about the future of ourselves, our families, and the community in which we lived. And the annual plan changed. And I want to thank you, Jeff, and the staff, and Thomas, particularly, for going back and understanding that in these unprecedented times, we were planning into a very uncertain future. But we had to carry the community with us, and we had to lead with confidence, and we had to keep their confidence. Our community looks to us, not to be conflicted and arguing over petty things. They look to us to put out a plan that shows we're investing in the future, not only of the ratepayers. To me, it's about my children and my grandchildren, and it's their future. But we must be cognizant of those that are struggling and vulnerable and finding cost pressures really difficult to bear. This plan is really, it's very progressive. I loved the way it came back with the 8 components that looked like a wheel that could start to turn. And it could start to turn to plan our progressive future of this place that we know has amazing attributes. I thank you for going back. I was astonished when the targeted rate went from 4.7 to 4. That to me was really meaningful because it showed that the Chief Executive had put pressures both within the organisation, and this was the result of your total rethinking and reframing, but also putting aside the 29 million that would help us invest in the economic future in an uncertain time, and also building community resilience with that $1 million fund. There are not many other councils that have got an annual plan that is as innovative, as caring of our community, and certainly done in partnership. We must actually celebrate some of the benefits that we're seeing already. We've got over $100 million in the time of this annual plan process with our workshops that has been invested by central government into this community. They understand the partnership with Te Arawa. They understand the partnership that we saw with businesses the other night in their Buildback Better workshop to us in the recovery of COVID, and they understand the way that we work together. This is so innovative. There's not many other organisations in New Zealand that has Housing New Zealand Kāinga Ora sitting right in the heart of their organisation, working with our financial team, our economic team, our Rotorua Economic Development and our economic unit to say, how do we get even more leverage if we could cog together and make our wheels move faster? The manifestation of the signing of the MOU with Ngāti Whakaui tribal lands yesterday, and Kāinga Ora, and Council, was something that I wished every councillor was at, because you ought to feel, like I felt, incredibly proud that that investment is now manifesting in housing that will house our homeless, those that can't afford houses, and start to meet our housing plan strategy. Just want to mention a little bit about Trility. I don't know why that was actually brought up. It's quite cost neutral. I'm continuing. It is quite cost neutral in our annual plan. We're yet to decide on what we're going to do there. But actually, signals from government yesterday were very positive about the framing of our contract for our waters fit that future direction. Sorry. Once again, we're onto it. So affordability is absolutely critical to us all. We argued it at workshops. We argued the toss about the UAGC. We argued about general rates, and we argued about targeted rates. And that's how we spread the load and ease the burden of rates for our community. I thank those that didn't get what they wanted. Some aspects, councillors accepted the toss, that perhaps some things they were passionate about weren't reflected, but they understood the numbers. We're a democratically led organisation, and we've all got one vote. And I think those that vote for this annual plan today show that they back our community, they back our future, and they back the people in here that we care about the most. I'm incredibly proud of this council, and I hope the positive outcome of the vote that we're going to have today. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I just have a few minutes for right of reply to some of the comments made, please? I welcome the debate around the table, and I'm glad to hear councillors who are opposed or on the fence making their comments. I'm disappointed in slurs here and in previous meetings, such as slurs on the independence of legal advice, terms like pork barrel politics. Let's stick to the issues and let's have a healthy debate. And the comment was made using debt to run the business. Now, really, the debt, if you read the annual plan, the debt for operational is to fund the rates deferral. And Councillor Wang, I asked the question the other day, beyond this annual plan, they'll be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, any people who have those issues. Also, there to bridge the gap in the hit to our fees and charges during lockdown, etc. Council has cut costs, so there's no there's a moratorium on recruitment unless absolutely essential, and no salary increases for the forthcoming year. I think that speaks to that. In terms of no future proofing, no resilience built into this, just one example, the replacement of streetlights with LED is going to add resilience in terms of our exposure to electricity costs going forward. The lifting in this annual plan, if you've read it, in the investment in pensioner housing renewals from 115,000 to 600,000, that speaks to Councillor Rokawa Tate's comment of It's about all of us. And the $25 cut to the UAGC, it's about equity. So this is an annual plan that's about all of us. Unaffordable runaway debt, well, we've retained our Fitch AA credit rating, Your Worship. And, we're very careful about how, and I agree with you that $29 million of debt for projects, which we'll have a case-by-case discussion about whether we invest that or not, has leveraged profound investment from central government. And it's that alignment with central government which this annual plan also speaks to. So that's just my response to some of the comments that are raised, and I continue to support this annual plan. Thank you, Your Worship.
Debate and discussion, so I need a mover and a seconder. We have Councillor Donaldson, seconded Councillor Maxwell. I now put it to the vote that Council adopts the annual plan 2020-2021 and notes the plan shows commitment to the Rotorua Buildback Better Recovery Plan and the key council priorities. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Division? Don't need a division. 3. Oh, you wish to know of Councillor McPherson? That is... He's asked for it to be recorded, so that is quite clear. So, thank you. The annual plan is passed. Can I thank those that understand about, and I hope we move forward from here. This is a very exciting annual plan, and we do value creative input instead of negativity. Right, we move on now to the setting of council rates for the year 1st of July to the 30th of June. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report setting council rates for the year 1st of July 2020 to the 30th of June 2021 be received? Moved Councillor Yates, seconded Councillor Rokawa Tate. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thomas, you're going to overview the report. This is always the second part of the annual plan adoption.
Thank you, Worship. With following on from the adoption of the annual plan, I'd just ask the Council to set the rates as outlined in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Which speaks for itself, really. You have a question, Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The final item on the discount for early payment, Thomas, is that set in stone yet, or is it still up for negotiation?
It's as per set out in our annual plan that was just adopted.
Are there any other questions of Thomas? It's pretty clear when we've gone through the workshops and seen where the rates lie.
So, Madam Chair, could I just make a comment, please? Yes. And it's really something that I clearly remember that former councillor Glenys Sharank used to say so often when it was around the rates. And she said, unfortunately, rates is never an easy thing, but she used to say that there will be some people who will be happy and some who will be less happy. And winners and losers, as she said, I think it was her call. And I remember that, and I thought, yes, because when we do have our hefty discussions and debates, at the end of the day, you end up with something that you hope will be people that will clearly understand what we were trying to do in setting the rates. So I think I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion that people want to have? Councillor McPherson.
Time for statements. I have no questions for.
No, there are no more questions? So we need to put a mover and a seconder, and then we make the statements. I need a mover and a seconder that Council, in accordance with Section 23 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002, set the rates as set out below. In accordance with Section 24 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002, set the rates the dates by which rates must be paid as set out below. in accordance with sections 57 and 58 of the Local Government Rating Act 2002, set the penalties that may be added to unpaid rates as set out below, and set the discount for early payment. So do I have a mover? Councillor Wang, seconder. Councillor Rokawa Tate. All those in favour? Oh, no, not yet. Now we've got the discussion. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. In my view, setting of the rates has to be done in context. We need, I believe, to come to terms with the scale of the revenue shortfall. Use it to cut back on expenditure with old-fashioned cost compression and avoid the borrowing to pay for operational expenditure, which tends to lead to insolvency.
Point of order, Councillor McPherson. We have made those decisions. We voted on those decisions in the annual plan. This is just setting out the rates. It's not relitigating.
I understand that a 4% increase is being decided by this motion because it's setting the rate.
By the previous motion.
And my view is that setting of the rate has to be done in context, and I'm sketching out a few ideas to do with context.
No.
Not acceptable to you?
No, it's not to me. It's
sad.
not acceptable because of the previous vote. We've had the debate. You spoke on that. You were given time to speak on that debate. This is simply the rates.
I was given very limited time, which didn't appear to apply to you or to the Deputy Mayor.
Councillor McPherson, respect to the Chair, please. Do you wish to finish your argument? Do you wish to finish your discussion?
Seriously, we're involved in the process of setting the rate.
According to the annual plan. So we've passed the annual plan. This is just to strike the rate.
Point of order, Your Worship. We're setting the rates in accordance with the Local Government Rating Act. So this is a legislative mechanism simply to collect what we've decided to levy in the annual plan. It's not a relitigation of the level or the quantum of the rates, Tate.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Bentley? No. Councillor Maxwell? Councillor Kumar? Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, just a comment, picking up on Councillor Bentley's question earlier on about the 2% discount for earlier repayment. 2% is a pretty healthy discount in the current climate. So we may well see a few people avail themselves of that. I certainly will be. I always save for my rates in advance. I'll be going for that 2% discount because you don't get much more in the bank.
Councillor Yates, do you wish to say? Councillor Councillor Rokawa Tate?
No, Madam Chair, I've just been sitting here and listening to a bit of the conversation, and I really do think that if you're sitting at this table, you should know what you're talking about. You know, really. Some of the conversation that we've had it just shows clearly that some councillors need to come up to speed with actually the work of council. What we discussed in the workshops, what we've had through our SPNF meetings and operations and management, and now here, it really beggars belief that we're having some ridiculous discussions from time to time, or comments. So can you please get with the program? Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me if I was a bit rude there.
Councillor Kaifong? No. Councillor Wang?
Just a quick comment. I think this is pretty straightforward. I mean, we're doing this in accordance with the Local Government Rating Act, and that the discounts for the early payment will come in as a relief for many.
And I'll just follow up with a comment that I've found our council officers through the Chief Executive very, very amenable to new councillors who don't understand the cycle to come and talk to them about the mechanisms that we use in an annual plan cycle. So do avail yourself of coming to talk to Thomas and Jeff. Their doors are always open, and then we don't have these rather bizarre challenges at the wrong time to what is a cycle that just repeats itself. And we're about to get into the long-term plan. So it would be good to have a little heads up about that. The workshops covered all of this off very, very, very patiently with us all, and with the community board members and with Te Tato. So I'm not sure why we're having to clarify what today is all about. But this is purely mechanistic for the setting of rate, the striking of rates, which you must do with the annual plan. You had your opportunity to speak, so you didn't take it. No, you don't. You don't have a right of reply. This is the rules of debate. You were not the mover. It's the mover that gets the right of reply. So we do need to learn about how you use your democratic voice at this table. So I'm going to put the motion that council, as listed, set the rates. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? So, goodness me, 2 again. Right. We move now, it's passed. Thank you, and thank you, Thomas. Now, we move to the next item of business, which is, does the district plan provide adequate provision to control the negative effects of prostitution? I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report, does the district plan provide adequate provision to control the negative effects of prostitution, be received. Moved Councillor Rokawa Tate, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. And thank you, Rosemary, you're going to present. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. We had a information session for councillors just to provide an update, because this matter came originally before the previous council. So this is really around dealing with the possible negative effects of prostitution, a matter that have been referred back to officers to discuss. By way of background, prostitution is a legal activity, and for council it's around the need to balance the right to people's access to sexual services with protecting the public and from nuisance and minimising the potential for offensive behaviour in public places. And the bylaw is the tool that we have been using to do that. It's similar to the way we balance some of the negative effects of alcohol on our community. The Prostitution Reform Act outlines what a prostitution bylaw may cover, and that relates to signage and advertising and the location of brothels within our district. The Local Government Act challenges us when making a bylaw to determine what is a perceived problem we're trying to address, in this case in relation to the location of brothels and the signage relating to those and commercial sex premises, and to discuss whether the bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing those problems. The current bylaw, 2009 bylaw, was due for review in April last year. We didn't propose any changes to the bylaw at that time, and consultation went out and was completed with submissions being heard on the 14th of February. At the March 2019 SPNF committee, officers amended and recommended a proposed bylaw. Those amendments were in response to some of the information at the hearings. At the hearing, there were some very good submissions that were heard, and those three very articulate submitters raised some good points, particularly in relation to small owner-operator brothels known as SUBs. And at the end of that, councillors questioned whether in fact we should be having a bylaw at all. So that matter was referred back to us to consider whether the district plan might be a better tool to manage the negative effects of this issue. At this stage, officers did quite a bit of research and had legal advice, and we looked at the district plan as a potential tool. Basically, a bylaw is considered actually a lot easier than the district plan to access and understand if you're looking for guidance around this topic. compliance enforcement are easier and much more timely with a bylaw than the district plan, and the level of detail and the specific issues you're trying to manage are not really appropriate in a more general district plan. The process to amend a district plan is also quite onerous and expensive, and in fact, because that's reviewed on a rolling basis, reviewing to include aspects around prostitution wouldn't be a high priority for a review to include. One of the issues that was raised by the submitters was clarifying issues around small owner-operated brothels and brothels, and the idea was to actually define that better in the bylaw. So a brothel is any premises kept for the purposes of prostitution, whereas a small owner-operated brothel means a brothel with a fewer number of sex workers, where those sex workers control their own earnings. And there is also a matter to clarify, which is that our district plan, when it looks at small at-home-based businesses, allows up to 2 people to work from home, but the definition in the Prostitution Act it talks about small owner-operated brothels being 4 or fewer members. So there's a little. However, we've always intended that the district plan covered any home business the same. It doesn't matter whether it's a brothel or anything else. It should be no different. At this point, the purpose of the paper really is to advise or recommend the next steps. There are several options. One will be to retain the current bylaw with no changes. We don't recommend this because it wouldn't address the issues that were raised at the hearing that were raised in particular to clarify around the small owner-operator brothels. And in fact, if we wish to make any changes at all, we do need to use the consultative procedure again to do that. And there are a number of options that we could put out for public consultation which weren't raised in the first round. So I think it's option B in the paper is what we'd recommend. However, what we've put before you is basically a statement of proposal to go out to consult again, and that's just to make sure that we do follow that legal advice, to make sure that all the options the public have had the opportunity to consider and give feedback on. Because in the first round we didn't put up a whole lot of different options. Those were raised through the process that we've held. So at that point I'll leave that, and if there are any questions or points of clarification.
Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Rosemary. Could you just give us a rough idea of what consultation, if we did decide to go out for consultation, what that would involve and cost, please?
It's really pretty much business as usual costs from the strategy team's perspective. We would be contacting all of the known stakeholders directly by email to let them know of the process. There'd be some public advertisements and our Facebook page and other normal communication mechanisms to let the public know. And then there would be a hearing in approximately 4 weeks after that, just to hear the views, just to make sure we have followed the full process around setting a bylaw.
Tate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have looked at this, and it is, as Rosemary has said, prostitution is a legal activity, and what you're asking us today is to consider possible negative effects that may not be there or may not eventuate at all. I do remember the submitters, particularly one in particular, and there was no substantive changes requested. I do recall that as well. So I'm of the view, Your Worship and Councillors, that if it ain't broke, why attempt to fix it? So, look, I really can't support what we're being asked to today. We have a bylaw that has served us well. I appreciate you might want to make a few changes, but I just think at this, you could actually do that, because I think one of them was to clarify, one of the submitters asking you to clarify something. Well, we can do that at any stage. So that's why I say that if it ain't broke, then why it'll be attempt to fix something. Thank you.
Could I just explain? The legal advice we had as part of that investigation was that any amendment whatsoever we made did require us to consult again. Even just clarifying those matters that have been raised.
So what you're saying is, are you no? Because we've got to because we can retain the existing bylaw with no changes.
Yes, you could.
That's it. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Compliments on the nature of the workshop that you ran. It's very, very clear about the nature of the suggestions that were coming forward from that original piece of consultation. And I share Councillor Rokawa Tate's view that there doesn't appear to be any sound, solid reason for making any changes at all at this time. So unless there are problems that do arise in future, I would follow this view. So thank you very much.
Well, I want to speak to this because I think we're getting a bit confused, and I very clearly remember the passing of the Prostitution Law Reform Bill because I was the chair in Parliament at the time. And what we were trying to stop was street prostitution, advertising that was really in your face, and making sure that the sex worker was safe from a public health perspective. Our bylaw, you could drive a bus through it, and we were told to go back out. I don't see any harm whatsoever to have a consultative procedure to go out so that if in future we did get street workers on the street waving placards, we've got no teeth in our current bylaw to do anything about it. So I think knowing more of what we know now to keep the industry managed and clean, it's so much better if we go out and develop a new bylaw. It's not a difficult process. Actually, last time when it came to us, we kicked it for touch. We failed to make a strong decision on it. And I think now is the opportunity. We now hear council officers saying their recommendation is that we do go out, because the current one is not going to be helpful to manage what could happen in the future. So I'm very supportive of us going out to consult and to bring back a more rigorous bylaw. We'd look so silly as elected members if a problem did exist and and council officers come to us and say, we can't do anything about it. The bylaw doesn't cover that. So I think let's get it right. Let's do it once and get it right. Councillor. So I'm going to move that we do approve a prostitution bylaw as the most appropriate way of addressing the location of brothels, that's where they can be set up, including SUBs and other commercial sex premises in the district, as well as the placement and establishment of signage relating thereto, and that officers move to further consult the public on the statement of proposal. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Now, any further discussion, I think?
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Yates and then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Dave, and through you, Madam Chair. My questions, because I'm still, I probably am a bit like Raj was last time, sitting on the fence with this, because for me, especially in this world, we've already spoken around social media and the added use of not just your plain billboards. There are a number of alternative media applications that can now be used to highlight the extent of this. I suppose that's where, with option B, and knowing the future generations that are coming forward, option A, leave it as it is, doesn't allow for any form of videography or other forms of solicitation that isn't covered in A. So I kind of wanted to get more of an understanding around that, because that was my gap the other day in the workshop, even though it was discussed. I just fear that's our fear moving forward. We've got an up-and-coming generation who are very crafty in the way in which they can solicit and exploit. So if you could give me more confidence around that, either one of you. Thank you.
So as part of the work that was done to develop the paper, I spoke to a number of other councils that have a similar demographic makeup or industry to what Rotorua does. One of those councils was New Plymouth, and at that time they were dealing with an issue that was very similar to what you were talking about. So they had a sex premises that had a video that was playing with some adult content in a glazed shop window on their main street, and their bylaw didn't allow them to be able to respond to that. So that was one of the learnings, and that was again confirmed across the different councils, that we do need a mechanism to be able to deal with the changes in technology that option A, our current bylaw, doesn't allow us to do. It is.
The law was enacted.
So we're looking at 10 years.
Councillor Kaifong.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I don't think it's a biggie. I think this is a tidy-up exercise, as we discussed at SPNF back March 2019, was it? No wonder it's sort of dropped off our radar. But you know, at that, I think the submitters were concerned that SUBs weren't accounted for, and if we add SUBs to the definition, we do need to go out and consult again. That's the legal advice. So, I mean, that's the big tidy up, well, small tidy up really, but it's an important one, you know, that they are treated like any other home-based business. And I don't think it'll be super controversial out there, but it is important and it is tidy. And you know, currently the bylaw is not fit for purpose. I agree with the legal advice. So simply from that perspective, I think we should proceed.
Are there any other further questions? I know it's hard when you weren't at the debate last time and here in submissions. I do just see this as a tidy up myself. Councillor Kaifong.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. So we are talking about perceived problems or possible negative effects. So just in terms of how council decides when it does a review, so is it by a certain time period? Is it because of the number of complaints? Or is it that we are looking at possible potential future actions that might impact on the current bylaw?
Are you asking about how we determine when the reviews happen?
Yeah.
It's normally standard for a bylaw, it's every 10 years. It's just standard. You can review it any time before that, but normally you try to have a bylaw and have it right for the next 10 years. But I guess this is a topic where the community is changing quite a lot in their expectations. And I think if we just rolled it over this time without making changes, then that'd be 20 years without change. And the community's changed a lot in that time. Things like video content and just the expectations around, you know, the move away from large brothels to smaller owner-operated brothels is quite a big change.
So can I ask if the work that you did in 2019, was that not a review of the bylaw which decided not to do anything, that we've now been bringing it back within another year rather than 10 years as you're trying to suggest?
No, although the review was done, the matter was and it was consulted on, the matter was referred back to officers to do more work on it. And so a decision wasn't made on the bylaw at that time.
Kaifong, we actually said to officers, please come back to us on whether or not we need a bylaw.
Okay, so just one last question, because it's in this paper, it's around perceived problems or potential negative impacts, and I understood from the presentation the other day that there had only been effectively one complaint, which was around potential, I suppose, noise of people arriving, and that was the only issue that's really come to council, which is
I think, do you want to?
So there are two components around that. One is the preventative element of a bylaw. So the bylaw is much easier for people to be able to access and to be able to determine what can and cannot be done within the Rotorua Rohi. So that does prevent some of the issues arising in the first place. The other point is that when talking with our regulatory officers, they're able to use the bylaw when questions are raised to be able to clarify that, which again reduces the issues moving forward to where a response needs to be taken. So I think keeping in mind that preventative element is quite important. They do get questions around the location and the signage over time, and the bylaw helps with that.
Councillor Kaifong, I think you've raised the nub of the point, really. And Jeff has a suggestion.
Through the chair, I'm not sure this was a suggestion, but instead trying to, I think, provide a clear answer to what I suspect was a question and behind your questions. That being that could you pass the existing bylaw but direct staff to monitor and or undertake a further review within a preset period of time in the future, which is we could.
Does that mean we don't need to do anything now?
No, you would need to pass the current bylaw. So there is two actions here. You would need to approve the existing bylaw, and then secondly to direct staff to undertake those activities that you wished, whether or not that is a further review over the next 12 or 24 months, or to have take a proactive monitoring role, whatever you wanted to achieve.
Does that still trigger we need to go to full public consultation? Sorry, I'm just not trying to get the whole process clear in my mind as to the options about what we're doing.
If you directed, let's say, you decided to pass the existing bylaw, then that would not trigger further consultation. However, if you directed staff to undertake a set piece of work that resulted in recommendations for change at some point in the future, that would require consultation. Sorry, I should be careful how I frame that. It's not the decision to do it, it's the nature of the change that you ultimately decided at that point in the future that you'd have to consult on.
Effectively just delaying this until we get more information about whether or not there is actually a problem that needs to be fixed.
Well, look, I think we have a substantive motion that I moved, and I'm not prepared to amend it. I do believe the simplest way forward is that we approve this as the most appropriate way and then go out to consult and get the feedback. So I'm not prepared to remove my proposed resolution.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a point of clarification? So number 2 up there, so that means that voting for that would override our current bylaw. Really, in a sense, yes.
And take into account the issues that we think are more current that could be addressed. Is there any more discussion? Yes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kumar, then Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, I believe there was a collective 2 years ago that came and spoke to us with regards to the current bylaw, and it was almost like self-managing. Nobody wants that stigma. So they try to keep it very discreet as well. I think from what I've known is that in the last 5 years of being involved with campaigning and counselling, this is not quite so much of a problem. Nobody has come up to me in my shop or outside the street and said to me, hey, look, man, I've got a soup there. Immediately where there are some problems. I mean, people don't generally talk about it. They talk about drugs, they talk about pee and all the other stuff. But nobody talks about prostitution in Rotorua as being a problem, even though we are the tourism hub of New Zealand. And so I don't think that this is much of a problem, and probably to go and consult again on what we've already done in the last 2 years is probably adding more cost and more time to an industry that is one of the oldest in the world, and it's self-managing. I do feel that the officials probably could do with a bit more power because they're probably using some bluff to get around some of the things. That's my guess. But otherwise, they're doing really well. And we don't seem to have any problem reporting in newspapers or social media.
But that doesn't mean there isn't a problem that needs to be fixed. So we're really asking ourselves, what are we trying to do here? I think it's to contemporise our approach of where we find it acceptable for brothels and where we think single operators can work and other commercial premises and the signage. I don't think we need to make a big deal out of it. I think we're all on the same page, really. It's how do we get there with the least cost impact on our community. And it's that when we say consult, you think we're opening a raft of public meetings and media highlights, whereas really we're just saying, let's get a bylaw that answers our concerns if they do come to be. So it's the easiest way forward. Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, at the workshop that I heard what Rosemary and everyone had to say in that, for me, whilst if we look at Rotorua and we think it's not too much of a problem, not like Auckland, Christchurch or wherever, but would I be right, the resolution is trying to ensure that in the future possible signage, advertising can be tidied up now rather than staff not being able to do anything.
Thank you. It sort of does show that actually the prostitution law reforms worked, but we've got to have a bylaw. So I think that's probably enough debate, and I'm going to put the resolution that Council approves that a prostitution bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the location of brothels and subs and other commercial sex premises in the district, as well as the placement and establishment of signage relating thereto, and that officers move to further consult the public on the statement of proposal. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? 3. The motion is passed. Thank you. Right, I declare there is no further business. I declare the meeting closed and thank everybody for your participation and attendance.